Airline tries to downgrade black woman to economy unaware she's the secret owner of the airline. Every so often, a single moment on an airplane can change more than just travel plans. It can shatter prejudices, expose hidden power plays, and spark long overdue reckonings. Sharina Marshall was looking forward to a calm flight, a simple journey across the ocean to tend to personal matters. But as she boarded Skybird Airlines in New York's bustling John F. Kennedy International Airport, an unexpected confrontation in the business class cabin would set the stage for an unforgettable showdown. What neither the ill-tempered flight staff nor the condescending gate agents realized was that Sharina was no mere passenger. She was the secret owner of the very airline they served. Sharina Marshall woke up on a crisp Manhattan morning, the thin rays of the sunrise filtering through her floor-to-ceiling windows, and the gentle hum of early traffic providing a soft city soundtrack. She moved with practiced grace across her penthouse living room, mentally double-checking her schedule for the day. At 35, Sharina was the picture of poise, tall, slender, and with a magnetic confidence that turned heads everywhere she went. Though her rise in the business world had been meteoric, Sharina shunned public fanfare. Very few people outside her intimate circle knew the full extent of her holdings or her net worth. She had always believed that true impact arose from strategic anonymity. It allowed her to observe how people would treat her when they didn't know who she was, revealing honest character. And for Sharina, character was everything. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter, a reminder from her assistant that her driver would arrive in half an hour to take her to John F. Kennedy International Airport. Today's flight was a routine business trip to London. Officially, Sharina was to attend a series of high-level meetings with potential partners. Unofficially, it was an opportunity to inspect one of her most prized investments, Skybird Airlines, because Sharina's share was quietly funneled through a series of shell companies and holding firms. Hardly anyone at Skybird knew she was the true majority shareholder. She had remained a silent partner all these years, letting the airline's board run its day-to-day affairs. Before heading out, Sharina carefully chose her outfit. She wanted something comfortable for the transatlantic flight, but still appropriate for a business-class cabin. She settled on a tailored black jumpsuit paired with a sleek jacket, complemented by a simple gold watch. Her natural hair was styled in delicate twists, pinned into a neat bun. If anyone looked at her, they would see a confident, stylish traveler. No one would guess she was wealthy enough to buy entire fleets of planes if she so desired. As she slipped on her shoes, Sharina's mind drifted back to her humble beginnings. Born and raised in a tough neighborhood in Atlanta, she had watched her father struggle to keep a small diner afloat. At first, her dream of success seemed light years away, but Sharina's fervor for learning and her meticulous nature had propelled her to scholarships at top universities, culminating in an MBA from Harvard Business School. Eventually, she gravitated toward large-scale investments in technology, real estate, and yes, aviation. Satisfied that she had packed all her essentials, Sharina took one last look around. A sense of anticipation curled inside her chest. She had no idea that before the day's end, she would face a storm of prejudice, drama, and karmic reckoning that would shake Skybird Airlines to its core. Stepping out of the chauffeured car and onto the busy sidewalk of Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport, Sharina felt a familiar rush of energy. She had traveled extensively: Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, but there was something uniquely thrilling about the bustle of a major airport. The driver handed her 2 suitcases, one a carry-on that contained her laptop, essential documents, and a few personal items, the other a checked bag for her week-long stay in London. People streamed past, a blur of diverse faces and languages, each traveler absorbed in their own plans or worries. Sharina navigated to the Skybird Airlines check-in counters. She rarely required personal assistance at airports. Her years of travel had turned her into a pro at self-check-in. Still, the line at the business class desk seemed short, so she decided to finalize her check-in with a human touch. "Good morning," Sharina greeted the agent, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. Her name tag reading Rita. "I'd like to check in for flight SB 514 to London Heathrow." "Passport, please," Rita responded with a polite nod. Sharina slid her passport across the counter. Rita typed furiously into her computer, scanned Sharina's passport, and handed it back with a corporate smile. "You're flying business class today, Miss Marshall?" Rita asked, her eyes flicking to Sharina's neat outfit. "That's correct. Seat 3A, I believe," Sharina replied. Rita paused for a moment, verifying the seat assignment on her screen. "Yes, that's right. We have you in 3A perfect. Checking any bags?" "This one," Sharina said, placing her checked bag on the scale. "I'll carry the smaller suitcase on board." Rita tagged the luggage, printed Sharina's boarding pass, and handed it over. "Here you are, Miss Marshall. Enjoy your flight with Skybird Airlines." Sharina smiled. "Thank you." She was about to turn when Rita lowered her voice, leaning in slightly. "By the way, love your jacket." "Is it from Michael Kors?" Sharina chuckled. "Good eye." "Yes, it is." Rita beamed, as if the shared fashion interest momentarily bridged the gap between customer and service agent. Sharina left the counter with a glimmer of satisfaction. The quick, pleasant exchange reminded her that many of the airline's employees were kind, hard-working individuals, the backbone of Skybird's success. Little did Sharina know that this first amiable encounter at check-in would soon be overshadowed by a far darker clash. With her boarding pass in hand, Sharina headed toward the Skybird Sexby Lounge. One of the benefits of traveling in business class was lounge access, a calm oasis removed from the chaotic terminal. She planned to review some legal documents for an upcoming meeting. Specifically, she wanted to see how the airline's new diversity and inclusion programs were taking shape. As a silent owner, Sharina had championed advanced training for flight attendants, ground crew, and administrative staff to ensure top-tier service. She believed wholeheartedly in building a culture where respect was paramount, especially given her own experiences as a woman of color in corporate spaces. Upon entering the lounge, Sharina was greeted by the subdued ambience, plush chairs, soft lighting, and the faint smell of fresh coffee. Passing a miniature fountain, she found a cozy corner seat and pulled out her laptop. Just as she began scrolling through her documents, she heard a haughty voice from a few seats away. "Excuse me, I specifically asked for almond milk." Sharina lifted her eyes. A middle-aged white woman, draped in designer clothing and heavily bejeweled, berated a lounge attendant for bringing her regular milk. The attendant apologized profusely, scurrying back toward the beverage counter to correct the mistake. Sharina couldn't help but notice how harshly the woman spoke, her tone laced with entitlement. As Sharina went back to her screen, a figure approached. It was the lounge attendant, now carrying a tray with 2 coffees, one for the demanding woman and one complimentary for Sharina. "Ma'am, this cappuccino is on the house," the attendant whispered to Sharina. "It's an extra from the barista. Would you like it?" Sharina was touched by the gesture. "That's very kind of you, thank you." She glanced at the name tag, carrying a detail that momentarily made her inwardly chuckle, given the cultural connotation of that name. Karen smiled shyly, relief radiating across her face. She must have appreciated Sharina's calm and respectful manner compared to the earlier outburst. Sipping her complimentary cappuccino, Sharina couldn't help but feel a small pang of concern. Over the years, she had witnessed subtle racial biases and microaggressions in many first-class and business-class lounges. but she tried to give people the benefit of the doubt. Still, a nagging sensation told her something was amiss. She shrugged it off, attributing her unease to the normal tension of traveling. She returned to her work, ignoring the occasional sharp remarks from the demanding woman. Little did Sharina know that this sense of disquiet was an omen. Before her flight took off, she would experience a confrontation that would echo far beyond any cramped airplane cabin. It was nearly time to board. Sharina gathered her belongings, glanced at the overhead monitor displaying Skybird Airlines Flight SB514, London Heathrow, now boarding. She slipped her boarding pass into the outer pocket of her carry-on and made her way to the gate. A short line had formed, and Sharina positioned herself behind a young family. The father was scanning his phone for digital boarding passes while juggling a toddler on his hip. Sharina noticed how the father's eyes flicked to her and then away with a polite smile. She smiled back, offering a friendly nod. A flight attendant at the gate scanned Sharina's pass. "Welcome aboard, Miss Marshall," he said with a professional grin. Sharina smiled and followed the ramp, the hum of the airplane's engines gradually filling her ears. Inside the aircraft, Sharina took in the modern design. Skybird Airlines business class cabin was known for its spacious seating, high-tech in-flight entertainment, and tasteful navy blue upholstery. It pleased Sharina to see her investment reflected in this comfortable environment for passengers. As she approached seat 3A, Sharina set down her carry-on. The seat was a luxurious capsule, providing both privacy and ample legroom. A flight attendant wearing a crisp uniform with the Skybird insignia on her lapel walked by, offering a polite greeting. "Good afternoon. Can I help you with anything, miss?" "I'm all set, thanks," Sharina replied, giving her a friendly nod. She settled in, fastened her seatbelt, and flipped through the in-flight magazine. Images of exotic destinations teased her from the glossy pages, but Sharina had more pressing matters on her mind than a tropical getaway. She felt a slight jostle and looked up to see a middle-aged man and a young woman, presumably father and daughter, sliding into seats 3B and 3C. The father gave Sharina a cursory nod, and she smiled back. Beyond the typical hustle of boarding, everything felt routine for now. It took another 15 minutes for the cabin to fill. Sharina heard occasional laughter, gentle conversations, and the usual scramble of people trying to stow their carry-ons in the overhead bins. A few rows behind her, someone's phone rang loudly until another passenger hissed at them to silence it. As she looked around, Sharina noticed the same lounge attendant, Karen, step into the business class cabin with a tray of pre-departure beverages. She offered Sharina a choice of water, orange juice, or champagne. Sharina declined politely, not in the mood for a drink before takeoff. Finally, the head flight attendant, a tall man with salt and pepper hair named Robert Hayes, began the pre-flight announcements. It was time to buckle up and switch off electronic devices, or at least put them in airplane mode. Sharina felt a comfortable wave of calm wash over her. In just a few hours, they would be soaring over the Atlantic. Yet, that calm was about to be shattered by an unexpected and deeply disturbing confrontation. Barely 5 minutes after the cabin doors closed, Sharina felt a light tap on her shoulder. She looked up to see a stern-faced female flight attendant, name tag reading Olivia Benson, standing in the aisle. Olivia's brows were furrowed, her expression decidedly unwelcoming. "Ma'am," Olivia began in a clipped tone, "may I see your boarding pass, please?" Sharina frowned slightly. She had already presented her boarding pass at the gate. Still, she reached into her jacket pocket and handed it over. Olivia glanced at the pass and then at Sharina. Her eyes flicked with a subtle disbelief. "I'm afraid there's been a mix-up," Olivia said curtly. "This seat assignment doesn't seem correct. We'll need you to move to the economy cabin." A wave of confusion swept over Sharina. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. This is definitely my seat, 3A, business class." I checked in at the desk, and everything was confirmed. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, according to our records, seat 3A belongs to another passenger. I must ask you to follow me to the rear of the plane. We'll sort this out." A quiet hush fell over the nearby seats as passengers sensed the tension. Sharina felt her pulse quicken. "Olivia, I already have my boarding pass for 3A. As you can see, there's no confusion here. It's clearly printed business class, seat 3A, but Olivia didn't budge. Her stance was rigid, arms folded. "We've had some trouble with false seat upgrades in the past, Miss Marshall. You either move to the seat you purchased in economy, or we'll have no choice but to ask you to deplane." The insinuation was clear and stung Sharina with shocking force. She inhaled, willing herself to remain calm. "I'd like to speak to a supervisor or the head flight attendant," she said, her voice tempered with composed authority. By now, a few curious heads had popped up over the seats, an audience forming to watch the unfolding drama. At Sharina's request, Olivia huffed and beckoned Robert Hayes, the head flight attendant. Robert approached, wearing a more diplomatic expression than Olivia. "What seems to be the problem, Miss Benson?" Robert asked, glancing between Olivia and Sharina. Olivia's words came fast. "We have a passenger who claims seat 3A, but my records show that seat is claimed by someone else." She shot Sharina a distrustful look. "I believe Miss Marshall is supposed to be in economy." Robert studied Sharina's boarding pass. "Well, it does say 3A business class. Miss Marshall, did you book this seat directly through the airline or through a travel agency?" Sharina could sense Robert trying to mediate, but there was still a hint of suspicion in his tone. She answered confidently, "I booked it online, through the airline's website. I even checked in at the business class counter this morning." Robert scanned the barcode on the boarding pass with a handheld device. The little screen beeped, then displayed Sharina's valid seat assignment for 3A. Robert's brow furrowed. He turned the device toward Olivia, showing her the confirmation. "It appears Miss Marshall's seat assignment is legitimate," he said softly, as if not to embarrass his colleague. Then, shifting his attention to Sharina, he said, "I apologize, Miss Marshall, for this inconvenience. Let me clear this up." As he spoke, Sharina caught a flicker of something in Olivia's eyes, resentment. Sharina realized in that moment that this confrontation was not merely a bureaucratic error. Some personal bias might be fueling it. Olivia folded her arms tighter. "This is highly unusual," she said, almost spitting the words. "Let me check something with the ground staff." Before Robert could protest, Olivia marched down the aisle, presumably to use the intercom or consult someone in the galley. Robert smiled apologetically at Sharina. "Please, bear with us, Miss Marshall," he said before hurrying after Olivia. Sharina's heart was still racing, but she forced herself to remain composed. She reclined a bit in her seat, trying to steady her breathing. The father in 3B gave her a sympathetic look, but neither he nor his daughter said anything. The few other passengers in business class pretended not to stare. 10 minutes later, the plane was still on the tarmac, but there was a noticeable delay in the final pre-flight checks. Olivia reappeared, her posture rigid, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "Miss Marshall," she said, raising her voice so that nearly everyone in the surrounding rows could hear. "I've just spoken with the gate agent. It seems there's a discrepancy in the system that requires you to move to economy. We don't want to involve security, so please gather your things immediately." Sharina felt an icy surge of anger. This was quickly escalating into a public humiliation. She stood, holding her ground. "There is no discrepancy," she insisted. "I have the valid boarding pass confirmed by your head flight attendant. Why would I voluntarily move to economy when I paid for business class?" Olivia's eyes narrowed, scanning Sharina in a way that made Sharina feel singled out. "I'm sure you'll be more comfortable if you just comply," Olivia said in a tone dripping with condescension. By now, Robert had returned, stepping in to diffuse the situation. "Olivia, let's not do this in front of the passengers," he pleaded in a low tone, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "I've already verified Miss Marshall's boarding pass. If there's an internal system error, that's on us to fix, not on her." But Olivia seemed unwavering. "The gate agent insists Miss Marshall's seat was flagged as suspicious. I'll trust the gate agent over a faulty scanner." Sharina realized she could no longer remain silent. She needed to assert herself. "I'm sorry, but you have no right to downgrade me without proper justification. If you believe this seat is not mine, call your supervisor or the pilot, or get the gate agent here to explain." "I'm not moving." At that moment, a few other business-class passengers began to mutter, sensing the tension. A tall, older gentleman across the aisle piped up, "Is this going to delay our flight? Because if it is, maybe we need the pilot involved." That's when Sharina saw another flight attendant, a young black woman named Celeste, hovering near the galley. Celeste looked visibly uneasy, shooting worried glances at Sharina, as if to communicate silent empathy. Sharina appreciated this small gesture. It confirmed her suspicion that even among Skybird employees, not everyone supported Olivia's combative stance. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the intercom. "Cabin crew, arm doors for departure." Robert cleared his throat. "We're about to close the aircraft doors, Olivia," he said pointedly. "Let's settle this quickly." Then he addressed Sharina in a polite but urgent tone. "Miss Marshall, please remain seated. I'll speak with the pilot." Olivia attempted to protest, but Robert silenced her with a firm glare. He stepped toward the cockpit. Olivia stood seething, glaring at Sharina as if Sharina was the root cause of all her frustrations. Sharina turned to stare out the window, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to stand up and declare her real identity, to silence this nonsense by revealing that she was the majority owner of Skybird Airlines itself. But Sharina had built her career on strategic silence. She knew that unleashing this information prematurely could cause more chaos. No, better to let this play out until it was absolutely necessary to reveal the truth. Moments later, Robert reappeared with a man wearing a crisp pilot's uniform, Captain Andrew Bell, one of Skybird's most respected pilots. Captain Bell's calm demeanor radiated a sense of authority. He offered Sharina a polite nod before turning to Olivia. "I've been informed there's a seat assignment dispute?" Captain Bell asked, his tone measured but clearly expecting a rapid resolution. Olivia launched into her version of events. "Captain, this passenger seat is flagged as a duplicate. The gate agent suggested she's not the rightful occupant of 3A. I'm concerned we have a potential stowaway or someone who manipulated the system." A murmur ran through the cabin. The term stowaway was harsh and implied criminal intent. Sharina felt a flash of indignation. Captain Bell maintained composure. "I see." And the head flight attendant's scanner verified her boarding pass. Robert nodded. "Yes, Captain. It scanned correctly. I suspect an administrative glitch on the ground. Miss Marshall has the correct assignment, so I advise we settle her in business class and follow up later." Captain Bell nodded slowly. "Agreed. With all due respect, Miss Benson," he addressed Olivia, "we cannot delay this flight on account of a glitch. Miss Marshall, you're free to remain in your seat. I apologize for the confusion." Olivia's face hardened, but she said nothing. Captain Bell then gave Sharina a respectful nod. "Again, apologies, Miss Marshall. We'll be taking off shortly." With that, the pilot departed to finalize the takeoff sequence, and Robert exchanged a few quick words with Sharina. "We'll bring a complimentary beverage or meal upgrade for you as a gesture of good faith," he whispered. Sharina simply thanked him quietly, still reeling from the humiliating spectacle. Olivia stomped away toward the galley, leaving Robert to close the overhead bin above Sharina's seat. As Robert turned, Sharina noticed the flush of embarrassment on his cheeks. For a moment, Sharina felt sympathy. He was caught between a colleague who was clearly in the wrong and a passenger who was being unfairly targeted. But Sharina also recognized that the time for sympathy might soon end. If the cabin crew's prejudice could be this overt toward a business-class passenger, what about others who couldn't advocate for themselves? Nevertheless, the plane finally began to taxi. Sharina took a deep breath, determined to let the matter rest for now, but fate had other plans. This was only the opening act of a drama about to spiral far beyond seat assignments. 2 hours into the flight, Sharina tried to refocus on her work. The seatbelt sign was off, and Robert had resumed normal service, distributing drinks and snacks in the business-class cabin. Sharina was reading through her airline portfolio, specifically the sections about customer experience and diversity, when she heard a small commotion behind her. She turned to see Olivia, yet again, standing over the seat of another passenger this time, a young black woman in her late 20s. The woman wore a modest blouse and had her hair in natural curls. She looked terrified as Olivia admonished her about a similar seat confusion. "Ma'am, you're not supposed to be here. This seat is for a passenger who paid for extra legroom," Olivia declared loudly, ignoring the fact that the woman's boarding pass was in her hand. Sharina craned her neck to see the seat number 4D, also part of the business-class cabin. The woman shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I upgraded at the counter. I have the receipt," she stammered. Olivia refused to look at the receipt. The woman waved. "Ma'am, I've seen plenty of fake receipts. You need to move now." Enough was enough. Sharina unbuckled her seatbelt and rose. The father in seat 3B gave her a cautious glance, but Sharina nodded, signaling she was in control. "Is there a problem, Olivia?" Sharina asked in a calm but firm voice, stepping into the aisle. "This doesn't concern you," Olivia shot back, her face contorting in annoyance. "Please return to your seat, Miss Marshall." Sharina, voice steady, insisted, "It does concern me. I've been noticing a pattern in the way you're handling certain passengers. This woman has shown you her boarding pass and an upgrade receipt, yet you're still claiming she has no right to sit here." The young woman, tears now threatening to spill, looked at Sharina with gratitude. She was clearly relieved that someone was stepping in to defend her. Before Olivia could retort, Robert emerged, having noticed the commotion. "What's going on?" he asked in exasperation. Sharina answered, "This passenger has an upgrade receipt, but Olivia won't accept it. This is nearly identical to what happened to me earlier." The entire business-class cabin was now quiet, the tension palpable. Robert took the young woman's boarding pass and receipt, scanning it with his handheld device. Sure enough, it beeped a valid entry for seat 4D. Robert's shoulders sagged, frustration evident in his sigh. "It's valid," he said, pointedly looking at Olivia. "She has every right to be in 4D. Let's cease these confrontations, please." Olivia muttered something under her breath, something Sharina couldn't fully catch but sounded suspiciously like "they always find a way." Sharina's stomach twisted in anger. The microaggressions were no longer subtle, they were blatant. Still, Sharina turned to the young passenger and offered her a comforting smile. "You're fine. Enjoy the seat you paid for." The woman nodded, still visibly shaken, but quietly thanked Sharina. She sank into her seat and tried to compose herself. Robert escorted Olivia into the galley out of earshot. Though Sharina couldn't hear the full conversation, the urgent, hushed tones suggested he was reprimanding her. Sharina heard phrases like inappropriate behavior, and "this has to stop." However, Sharina also caught the edge of Olivia's defiance. "Don't lecture me, Robert. We both know what the manual says about suspicious passengers." Sharina returned to her seat, her nerves buzzing. The flight was only 2 hours in, and she was already mentally exhausted. She knew this fiasco wasn't over, that Olivia likely wouldn't let it go. Sharina began to wonder if it was time to expose her real identity. But a part of her wanted to gather more information, see if Olivia was acting alone, or if there was a systemic issue that needed to be weeded out at the highest level. Another hour passed. Dinner service started in the business class cabin, with Robert and Celeste deftly handing out trays of gourmet dishes. Sharina's appetite had evaporated, but she tried to force down a few bites, not wanting hunger to cloud her judgment. As she pushed her half-eaten meal aside, Sharina felt her phone buzz in her pocket, a reminder she'd set for a scheduled meeting via a special in-flight Wi-Fi service. She opened her phone to check messages. Her assistant, Carla, had texted, "All set for your arrival. Let me know if you need the Skybird board to meet you personally." Sharina's jaw tensed. There it was, the board of directors for the airline she effectively owned. If the staff in this cabin only knew. She typed a quick reply, instructing Carla to schedule a board meeting at the airline's London headquarters the following day. Just then, Sharina felt someone lurking over her shoulder. She glanced up Olivia again. Sharina immediately closed her phone screen. "Can I help you, Olivia?" Sharina asked, trying to keep her voice level. Olivia's expression was cold. "I noticed you're using your phone. We're at a cruising altitude where phone usage is allowed only if it's in airplane mode with Wi-Fi connectivity. You do have the correct plan, I assume." Sharina blinked. "Yes, I purchased the in-flight Wi-Fi package," she replied, holding her temper in check. Olivia's gaze flicked to Sharina's phone with skepticism. "Just make sure you're not interfering with aircraft signals." And with that, she marched off, not waiting for Sharina's response. A part of Sharina wanted to roll her eyes. The phone usage was obviously a non-issue, especially at cruising altitude with the airline's own Wi-Fi subscription. But Sharina realized that any slight chance Olivia had to target her, she would seize. Finally, Sharina decided it was time to push back. She quietly rose from her seat and slipped toward the galley, where Celeste was cleaning some glassware. Celeste looked up, a kind smile on her face that quickly faded into concern. "Miss Marshall, is everything okay?" Celeste asked, voice soft. Sharina mustered a smile. "Not exactly. Can you tell me where I can talk to Robert in private?" Celeste pointed to the small crew rest area, a narrow space near the cockpit door. "He's in there, sorting out some paperwork." Sharina thanked her and made her way to the crew rest area. She knocked gently on the doorframe. Robert, seated on a small stool, looked up, surprise etched on his face. "Miss Marshall, is there something I can do for you?" he asked, setting down the papers. Sharina took a deep breath. "Robert, the first need to speak candidly with you. The way Olivia has acted toward me and another passenger seems blatantly discriminatory. This is unacceptable. I want to file a formal complaint. But more than that, I want to see if this is something that's sanctioned by the airline's management." Robert ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, looking weary. "Miss Marshall, I fully understand your concern. I assure you that Olivia's behavior does not reflect Skybird's training or policies. She's always been a bit rigid, but this is the first time I've seen her behave this overtly." Sharina studied Robert's face, sensing sincerity in his eyes. "Do you have the power to remove her from this flight?" He frowned. "Not mid-flight, unfortunately. We're obligated to have a certain number of cabin crew on board. Once we land, I can file an official incident report. That's typically how it's handled." Sharina let out a breath, disappointed but not surprised. "All right," she said. "I do expect a thorough follow-up. And let me warn you, Robert, I have connections at the highest levels of Skybird." He nodded, looking perplexed but not skeptical. "I promise you, Miss Marshall, I will do everything I can to rectify this. You have my word." Sharina gave a tight smile. "Thank you." With that, she returned to her seat. She glanced at the flight status on the screen, embedded in the seat in front of her. They were about 4 hours away from London. It was going to be a long 4 hours, but Sharina felt a small measure of relief that Robert, at least, seemed committed to handling the issue. As the flight neared the halfway point, the cabin lights dimmed to encourage rest. Sharina tried to nap, but her mind whirred. She decided to watch a movie to distract herself. Halfway through the film, she caught a glimpse of movement at the corner of her eye. Olivia was heading toward her again, a resolute expression on her face. Sharina paused the movie, dreading whatever new confrontation Olivia had in store. To Sharina's surprise, Olivia's tone was quieter, though still tense. "Miss Marshall," she said, her lips barely moving. "I've just received a message from the ground staff. They want me to collect your passport and boarding pass." Something about final verification. Sharina's eyes hardened. "You are not taking my passport." Olivia's nostrils flared. "MAAM, it's a direct request from the ground staff in JFK. "If you refuse," Sharina cut her off, voice calm but resolute. "I will not surrender my passport to you. If there's an issue, we can address it with security when we land. Now please, leave me alone." Staring daggers, Olivia eventually stormed away, spouting something under her breath. Sharina could guess what was happening. She'd heard of discriminatory practices where staff singled out black passengers under the guise of passport verification. Sharina surmised that Olivia was either lying about the ground staff instruction or had twisted some mundane request to harass Sharina further. This was the last straw. Sharina pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to her assistant. Carla, draft a formal complaint to the Skybird board. Also, arrange for a senior management meeting as soon as I land." "I'm done with this nonsense," Carla replied within minutes. "Will do, standing by." Sharina's heart pounded. She was more determined than ever to bring this incident to light. The time for her anonymity was coming to an end, at least for those who had perpetuated these acts of discrimination. For Sharina, the flight couldn't end soon enough. At last, the seatbelt sign turned on for final descent into London Heathrow Airport. The city lights glittered below. Sharina looked out the window at the sprawling metropolis. She felt an odd mix of dread and relief, knowing the real showdown would happen on the ground. Upon landing, Sharina noticed Olivia watching her intently as passengers prepared to deplane. The plane rolled to a stop at the gate, and the cabin doors opened. Before Sharina could stand, Olivia blocked her aisle, a plastic smile pasted on her face. "Miss Marshall," Olivia said, voice deceptively sweet, "I'd like you to wait until all other passengers have deplaned. The captain has requested a word with you." Sharina raised an eyebrow. "I spoke to the captain earlier, and he apologized. Why would he request another conversation now?" Olivia's smile thinned. "I'm just following instructions." Robert, who was helping another passenger retrieve a bag from the overhead bin, overheard the exchange. He shot Olivia a sharp look, but didn't intervene immediately, busy as he was ensuring passengers exited safely. The young black woman from seat 4D passed by Sharina, pausing to whisper, "Thank you for everything," before continuing toward the exit. Sharina nodded, lips pursed, annoyance festering inside. Once nearly all the business-class passengers had deplaned, Sharina rose. Olivia stood in the aisle as if to block Sharina's path. Robert hurried over. "Miss Marshall, is there a problem?" he asked. Sharina pointed to Olivia. "She says the captain wants to speak with me. Is that correct?" Robert frowned. "No, that's not correct. Captain Bell is already off the plane to discuss logistical matters." "Olivia, you must be mistaken." Olivia's eyes darted between Sharina and Robert, caught in her lie. But she persisted. The ground agent from JFK must have asked for it. It was in the crew notes. Robert sighed, exasperated. "There are no such notes. Passengers are free to disembark. Olivia's expression twisted, and she stepped aside. Sharina brushed past Olivia, careful not to make physical contact. She walked toward the exit door, where Celeste and Robert stood. "Thank you, Miss Marshall," Celeste said softly, her eyes reflecting both admiration and sorrow for the ordeal Sharina had endured. Robert, face a blend of guilt and respect, nodded. "Miss Marshall, please accept our apologies. I will file an incident report. I'm deeply sorry." Sharina forced a polite smile. "Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your professionalism." Stepping into the jet bridge, Sharina inhaled the stale, cool airport air. She was finally free of the cramped cabin, but the real fight was just beginning. When Sharina entered Heathrow's arrivals corridor, she was met by a tall man in a sharp suit, holding a placard that read, "Miss E. Marshall." This was Brandon, one of the private security consultants Sharina had hired for personal matters abroad. "Miss Marshall," Brandon greeted with a courteous bow. "Carla informed us of the situation. We've arranged a private car. Also, a small group of Skybird executives are on their way to meet you at the arrivals lounge, if you wish." Sharina's eyes narrowed. "Executives already? That's surprisingly quick." Brandon checked his phone. Carla works fast, and word about the mid-flight incident might have spread. Possibly some staff forwarded a preliminary complaint. I also believe some passengers might have taken videos. Sharina's pulse quickened. She recalled a handful of onlookers in business class with their phones out. This was going to be bigger than she thought. "Let's go," she said, her voice firm. Brandon led the way through the immigration and customs lines. Sharina's expedited clearance allowed her to pass swiftly. Her passport was scanned without issue. Soon she arrived at a quieter section of the arrivals lounge, cordoned off with a velvet rope. Inside this makeshift VIP area stood three individuals wearing polished business attire and anxious expressions. Sharina recognized one of them from company photos, Grace Holloway, Skybird's chief operating officer. The other two were likely middle management from the airline's London office. The moment they saw Sharina, they rushed forward, all flustered apologies. "Miss Marshall, I'm Grace Holloway. I came as soon as I heard," said the woman in a polished British accent. She extended her hand, and Sharina shook it, noticing the anxious tremor. "We are so terribly sorry about what happened on your flight. And I understand it wasn't just you. A second passenger reported a similar problem with the same flight attendant." Sharina eyed the small group. She decided to address the elephant in the room. "Yes, Miss Holloway. The flight attendant in question, Olivia Benson, repeatedly harassed me and another black passenger. She attempted to downgrade me, demanded I give up my passport, and used language that suggested discriminatory bias." Grace's face paled. One of the men, apparently the head of Skybird's London HR department, cleared his throat. "I assure you, Miss Marshall, we take these allegations very seriously. We will launch a thorough internal investigation." Sharina's voice was calm but commanding. "I appreciate that. However, I want immediate action. I'm not just any passenger. I'm Sharina Marshall, the majority shareholder of this airline." The three executives looked as if a bomb had detonated in the lounge. Their eyes widened, jaws slack, as the weight of Sharina's words sank in. A hush fell over the group. Grace managed to speak first. You own a controlling share in Skybird?" Sharina nodded. "That's correct. And believe me, I've always preferred to keep a low profile. But this incident was the last straw. I refuse to tolerate racism or discrimination in an airline that I have poured millions of dollars into. Understand?" The executives nodded vigorously. A trembling hush lingered as Sharina continued. I want Miss Benson suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. I also want a thorough review of the airline staff training. Clearly, whatever protocols are in place, they aren't enough. And if I find that others in management have enabled such behavior, heads will roll. Grace's face showed a mixture of shock, remorse, and fear. We hear you, Miss Marshall. We'll do everything possible to address this swiftly. Please accept our deepest apologies. We'll make this right. Sharina exhaled, feeling the tension in her chest lighten marginally. Good. I'd like a written report on my desk within 48 hours. With that, Sharina turned to Brandon. Shall we go? Brandon nodded and held open the lounge door. The stunned executives parted like the Red Sea. Sharina walked out, her chin high, leaving them to absorb the gravity of her ultimatum. The following day, Sharina arrived at Skybird's London corporate offices, a stately glass and steel building in Canary Wharf. She'd come prepared, wearing a tailored navy skirt suit that radiated authority. Her presence sent a ripple of excitement and nervousness through the staff. Word had spread quickly about the incident on flight SB 514. Rumors circulated that Sharina was not just another passenger, but the biggest shareholder in the entire airline. Grace Holloway and other members of the board were waiting in a sleek conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of London's skyline, but Sharina barely glanced at the city. She was here for business. Miss Marshall, Grace began, flipping open a binder of documents. This is the preliminary report on what transpired. We've also begun an internal investigation into Miss Benson. She's been suspended, pending the outcome. Sharina flipped through the pages, skimming the official statements. She saw that passengers, including the young woman in 4D, had written formal complaints. Robert Hayes had also given a statement confirming Olivia's inappropriate behavior. Sharina felt a surge of relief that so many had come forward. This is a start, Sharina said, her voice level. Now, to the next matter, systemic changes. I want mandatory racial bias training for all staff, from flight attendants to gate agents. I also want an anonymous reporting system for passengers and employees who witness or experience discriminatory incidents. Grace nodded, scribbling notes. Yes, we're already planning to roll that out. Additionally, we'll reevaluate our performance metrics for cabin crew to reward not just efficiency, but also empathy and professionalism. A slender man in a crisp suit, introduced as Rupert Davies, Skybird's chief legal officer, leaned forward. Miss Marshall, we also wanted to update you on some legal aspects. If Miss Benson is found guilty of discrimination, the airline could face lawsuits. Do you have any preference on how we proceed if that occurs? Sharina didn't hesitate. I want the airline to defend itself properly, but I also want any necessary reparations made to the victims of discrimination. We will not sweep this under the rug. Rupert nodded, understood. The meeting lasted another 2 hours, going through every detail of the incident and Sharina's expectations for corporate reform. By the end, Sharina felt a mixture of anger and cautious optimism. At least she now had the power to force real change, something that might protect future passengers from enduring what she did. 2 weeks later, Sharina found herself back in London for a follow-up meeting. Grace Holloway had invited her to a special HR hearing regarding Olivia Benson's fate. Sharina was conflicted about attending, but ultimately decided it was important to be present, both to witness justice and to show that leadership cared. The hearing took place in a smaller, more private conference room within Skybird's HR department. Olivia, looking nervous but defiant, sat at one end of the table. Her uniform was gone. She wore a plain blouse and slacks. Her eyes flickered with resentment when Sharina walked in and took a seat opposite her. Grace and Rupert presided over the hearing. Robert Hayes also attended to provide testimony about the in-flight incidents. Sharina observed quietly as the process unfolded. Olivia's defense centered on claims of security protocol and miscommunication. She alleged that the gate agent in JFK had made contradictory statements, prompting her to doubt Sharina's seat assignment. Olivia also insisted she had no racial bias. She was merely following the suspicious passenger guidelines. The tension in the room was thick. Sharina listened to each excuse, each half-truth, with mounting disbelief. Finally, Robert was asked to give his testimony. He calmly recounted how Olivia had ignored the verified data from the handheld scanner, singled out Sharina and another black passenger, and even tried to block Sharina from disembarking. Rupert produced documentation showing that no gate agent had flagged Sharina's seat or requested a passport check, contradicting Olivia's story. He also introduced statements from the other black passenger in seat 4D, verifying Olivia's similarly harassing behavior. By the end of the hearing, the evidence against Olivia was overwhelming. Grace announced the board's decision: immediate termination for violating Skybird's code of conduct, passenger rights, and anti-discrimination policies. Olivia stood, her face a fiery mix of anger and shame. She threw Sharina a scathing glare before storming out, muttering about filing her own lawsuit. Sharina steeled herself. She knew groundless threats often followed such dismissals, but she also knew Skybird's legal department was more than capable of handling them. Outside the conference room, Robert approached Sharina. "Miss Marshall, I just want to say thank you. No passenger should have to endure what you and that other woman did. We need to be better." Sharina offered a tight smile. "That's the goal. I appreciate your honesty and support, Robert." Robert nodded, relief and gratitude evident in his eyes. With Olivia's chapter closed, Sharina turned her attention to the bigger picture, ensuring that her airline soared above the clouds, not just physically, but morally as well. The fallout from the incident sparked wide-reaching changes at Skybird Airlines. Sharina used her newly revealed status as majority shareholder to push through a wave of reforms. A brand new equity and inclusion task force took shape, mandated to review every layer of the airline's operations, from hiring practices to customer service protocols. The media eventually caught wind of the story. A passengers in-flight video had gone viral on social media, showing Olivia trying to downgrade Sharina. Headlines read, "Business class discrimination? Skybird passenger faces seat downgrade. Turns out she owns the airline." Sharina, initially wary of the spotlight, took advantage of the attention to issue a public statement about her commitment to making Skybird a welcoming airline for all. Public sentiment largely sided with Sharina. Many praised her for handling the ordeal with dignity, although Sharina knew there were corners of the internet where trolls spun the narrative. She refused to let that distract her. Positive changes were happening: staff retrainings, new policies, and a wave of internal promotions to elevate employees who demonstrated empathy and excellence. Skybird's board of directors, once comfortable in their routine, now realized they had to be more vigilant. Sharina attended board meetings in person, no longer content to hide behind her silent partner status. Her presence was impossible to ignore: a powerful black woman taking command in a realm often dominated by men. Interestingly, Skybird's stock price began to climb. Investors welcomed Sharina's push for better customer experiences, sensing that a progressive brand stance could attract more flyers. Sharina saw it as a vindication of her core belief that treating people with fairness and respect wasn't just morally right, it was also good business. A month later, Sharina flew once more to London on Skybird Airlines. This time, her seat assignment, still business class, came with no fuss. The cabin crew recognized her, offering sincere welcomes. Though Sharina had insisted she be treated like any other passenger, she could sense their eagerness to make a positive impression. Mid-flight, as Sharina relaxed with a steaming cup of tea, she noticed a stir near the cabin entrance. The flight attendant, Celeste, quietly approached Sharina. "Miss Marshall, there's a former Skybird employee here traveling in economy. She requested an upgrade, but it was denied. She's quite agitated." Sharina set down her cup. "A former employee? Who?" Celeste's eyes held a hint of discomfort. "It's Miss Olivia Benson, ma'am. She's traveling for some personal matter, apparently." Sharina's eyebrows shot up. What were the chances? "She approached the desk for an upgrade?" Sharina repeated. Celeste nodded. "Yes, but her request was flagged by the system, presumably due to her dismissal. She's causing quite a scene in the economy cabin." Sharina sighed. A swirl of conflicting emotions rose within her. Part of her felt pity for Olivia, jobless and presumably struggling. Another part recalled the deep humiliation and stress Olivia had caused Sharina and other passengers. Before Sharina could respond, Celeste continued, "She's demanding to speak to whoever's in charge. We told her politely that there are no free upgrades, and seat changes are not permitted on full flights without a valid purchase." A faint, wry smile tugged at Sharina's lips. Karmic justice, indeed. She rose from her seat, telling Celeste, "I'll speak to her." Moving through the aisle, Sharina made her way to the economy section. It was busier, more cramped, filled with the usual hustle of flight attendants trying to serve meals in a narrow space. Amid the rows, Sharina spotted Olivia, hair disheveled, face streaked with frustration. She was half standing, arms folded tightly, scowling at a young flight attendant who was trying to maintain composure. When Olivia saw Sharina approach, her expression shifted from anger to disbelief. She sputtered for a moment. "You," she finally managed, her voice tinged with both resentment and desperation. Sharina kept her tone even. "Miss Benson," causing a scene. Olivia glanced at the other passengers, who were now very much interested in the drama unfolding in row 28. She lowered her voice. "Look, I just asked for an upgrade. I can't stand economy. I used to be crew, so I know how this works. Couldn't they just seat me in business if there's a spare seat?" Sharina surveyed the cabin. "I doubt there's a spare seat in business class. And even if there were, upgrades aren't handed out based on demands." Olivia clenched her jaw. I'm sorry, okay? For everything. Things got out of hand. Now I'm stuck with no job, and I'm trying to see my family. The least Skybird could do is treat me decently after all the years I gave them." Sharina felt a stab of complex emotion. This was the same woman who had tried to degrade her publicly, whose prejudice had nearly escalated into Sharina being forcibly removed from a flight she had every right to be on. Yet here Olivia was, seeking Sharina's mercy. After a heavy pause, Sharina spoke softly. "Everyone deserves to be treated decently, Miss Benson. That's what I fought for." A flicker of realization passed over Olivia's face. "I know, I messed up, and now I'm paying the price." Sharina nodded. No triumph in her expression, just clarity. "We all deal with the consequences of our actions, Miss Benson. This is how the system works now. If you want a business class seat, you pay or redeem miles. There's no special treatment because you used to work here." Olivia looked down, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "Fine," she whispered, sinking into her economy seat. Sharina signaled the young flight attendant to resume the service. She turned to head back to business class, feeling the eyes of curious passengers on her. She didn't relish Olivia's downfall, but she was satisfied that justice had run its course. This was, in its own way, a final karmic note to an otherwise tumultuous saga. Returning to her seat in business class, Sharina tried to relax, letting the adrenaline of the encounter subside. She sipped her tea, a sense of peace settling over her. The humiliations she had endured were real, but they had set in motion a cascade of changes that would make Skybird better for everyone. When the plane touched down in London, Sharina disembarked without delay or drama. Stepping into Heathrow's arrivals terminal, she felt a renewed sense of optimism. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for countless passengers who might face similar biases. And in doing so, she had proven that the strongest power wasn't simply wealth or ownership, it was the determination to stand up for what was right, even when it would have been easier to remain in the shadows. Sharina Marshall's journey showed that sometimes the most ordinary moments, like taking a flight, can spark extraordinary change when the right person refuses to remain silent. What began as an insulting attempt to downgrade her to economy soon unraveled deeply rooted prejudices, forced a corrupt flight attendant to face consequences, and paved the way for sweeping improvements across the entire airline. In shining her light on injustice, Sharina set a precedent. No matter how high we may fly, true progress happens when we uplift everyone. If you found this story inspiring or eye-opening, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the message that dignity and equality should be non-negotiable in every part of our lives. Let's keep the conversation going, keep each other accountable, and never forget that real change often takes just one brave voice to begin. Safe travels, everyone, and stay empowered.